Is your poo, I mean your company's poo, more disgusting? Hi and welcome to Not a Perfumery podcast, where we talk about scents in relation to wellness, art and innovation. My name is Tanya. I'm a Denmark-based olfactory educator, and I also help companies across Europe to design unique scents for their projects. My guest for the today's episode is Liam R. Findlay. Liam is themed attraction and historical scenting consultant at AromaPrime, the leading UK company in scent marketing. Liam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to chat.
Likewise. And before the listeners will find out what does the themed attraction and historical scenting even mean, please tell us a little bit about you. I really noticed that you have a very bright personality.
Thank you. Well, like you said, I work at AromaPrime, but in my spare time, I like storytelling a lot and kind of connected to my job. I enjoy themed entertainment, so theme parks and museums, and I write stories as well. Well, connecting to the topic of smells, I've written a children's book called The Dummies, which is about a girl who communicates with the dead through her supernatural sense of smell.
Great. So basically, it seems like you and your work are a perfect match.
Yeah, that's why I find it hard to talk about myself when I'm not talking about work, because
You're very lucky.
I kind of thread them together. And when I'm not doing work, it tends to be something that's related to it in some way.
Beautiful. So, right, then it's high time probably to say what is themed attraction and historical scenting? What does it mean?
In my role, I advise lots of themed attractions. So that generally means theme parks and museums and immersive theatre, escape rooms, that kind of thing, on how to use smells to tell stories. Maybe to create atmosphere or to make visitors feel a certain way or to influence their behaviour. And I also historical sense tie into that. So that's normally with museums. So I'll advise on kind of developing historical sense, and I'll direct our factory when a customer's done some research and they want to kind of recreate or create an interpretation of a scent from the past. And sometimes, as well as museums, it might be themed attractions as well that want to kind of be true to the past in the immersive spaces that they're creating.
What does this process usually involve? Like, what are the steps?
Often a customer will come to us with a project that they're working on. For example, today I had a call from a museum who wanted advice on making an interactive feature for an information board. They wanted people to be able to sniff the information board.
Wow.
So I discussed kind of the product that they could use. So I suggested a scented block rather than like a liquid machine that would diffuse a mist. They can just have a simple scented block behind some perforations on the board. And we discussed how far the scent might travel, how they can kind of limit it if they don't want it stinking out the whole corridor, or also the kinds of scents that might be strong enough to be sniffed because they didn't want it to be too weak. And then, of course, the scent that they wanted. So they wanted hospital smells, historical hospital smells. So in this case, AromaPrime has, in its massive library of smells, we have a few hospital ones, including modern and old-fashioned hospital smells. So we arranged some samples for them to try. So
now I'm interested to smell the old version as well, because the modern one, unfortunately, I know how it smells. Yeah.
Yeah, the old one is kind of changed a couple of times. We sometimes tweak it. I can't remember exactly what the chemicals like that it's replicating are, but there's kind of like old anesthetic chemicals and some leather because the materials would have been different, say in the 1930s to what we have in modern hospitals.
Yeah, and I also believe that even like alcohol-based solutions, for the hygiene products, they are also kind of new.
Yeah, the modern hospital smell tends to be a lot more like cleaning products that we're used to than the old interpretation is.
Yeah. But like, who usually creates these scents? Do you have a team of perfumers, or you work with some houses, but you just give them briefs? Like, how does it work? Because I was pretty sure that it was you who creates scents, when I first saw it.
Kind of, ironically, people kind of expect me to be a perfumer, but I don't
You do
have any...
you do look like one. That's why.
Yeah, I often dress as one for marketing purposes, but I don't have any perfume background, although I've kind of been learning some things along the way. In terms of AromaPrime, the company was 50 years old last year, and over the years it's been the people that have worked there, particularly the first couple of owners, they created lots of formulas that have kind of been added to a collection. And then we work with different manufacturers who use our formulas and put them together. And then also in-house in our own factory, we'll make different blends using the different oils we have because we have a big stinky stock room. These sorts of horrible things.
Beautiful. So it seems like you have your own collection, which was built through years, and it were both you, your previous colleagues, and maybe like even some like invited guests who created something for you.
Yeah, well, it was mainly our founder, Fred Dale, who he kind of worked on scents himself, and also Frank Knight, who came after him. They kind of taught themselves some perfumery, but they also worked with experienced perfumers. These days, because we have such a big collection, we don't tend to make new smells anymore because it's incredibly rare that we have to.
You happen to have like around 400, am I right? Or even more?
Yeah, I tend to say 400, but it kind of goes up and down when we kind of tweak the collection, but I think 400 is an average.
Right. And you partly already mentioned, Liam, but what are usually in fragrance sense, it's usually called applications, but in your like probably the diffusion system would be the right way to put it. Like maybe what are the most common diffusion systems you have in your company?
We have kind of three main models that are the most popular, which are like standard nebulizing machines. So you put some oil into them and then it comes out as a mist, or you can put a tube into it and direct the scent somewhere. But then we also have what are called aroma cubes, which are little plastic cubes for sniffing. So they're popular with schools. They have little holes in the top and a scent inside. So they're nice. They're also secure, so you can't open them, which is good for if schools are using them, or if museums are using them for tours, or if they're used in care facilities where there might be vulnerable people. And then we also have the aroma block, which is what I was mentioning earlier for what I was discussing with the customer today. So that's a metal container, and it has a scented spongy material inside, and then that's underneath the perforated metal grate, and it has a lid, so you can just take the lid off when you want the smell to come out. And that's quite popular with historic sites where they're conscious of conservation and they don't want liquid particles everywhere. So that's a nice dry diffusion option for them.
That's so beautiful that you really know what different categories of customers want. And it was you who said that, but I was also about to mention it, that some museums tend to have limitations just because they don't seem to understand that there are different way of diffusing a smell or using a smell in the exhibition. So they think that it's only something like to put in smell near the ventilator or something like that, or using aroma machines, but many of them don't know what's that. Do you also feel that this is the case for the museums, that they just don't know that they could use other solutions and preserve the collection and it's going to be all fine?
Yeah, I think there are some who are perhaps not aware, understandably, because scent isn't all that much explored, and it's perhaps not included in much training and that kind of thing. So people, I suppose, have to kind of find out for themselves sometimes. Lots of our customers, obviously, because they've used our products, they're kind of familiar with the options available. But sometimes, like with the customer on the phone today, they'll be kind of pleasantly surprised when they find out about the dry diffusion options that are better for conservation, and the fact that you can have little objects rather than this massive scent machine. Yeah, so it varies, but it's nice to be able to share the knowledge.
Yeah, totally. And about the big scent machines, as we call them, and I was talking about ventilators, which is the previous epoch probably. Like the machines you have, I noticed that you do have your own. You produce them. Could you please tell a little bit about it? Because I was so surprised to see them and for a very reasonable price as well.
Yeah, well, I'm not entirely sure about the development of our main 3 machines. I believe my colleague worked with a manufacturer, either to source or kind of tweak some existing models. But we do have one that I know more about, is the multi-scent DMX machine, which is a machine that can use up to 3 smells at the same time. And that was one that I was more involved in the process of developing, and that was we worked with a manufacturer from the beginning to end to create this, and it's been nice and popular. And I think actually we might be adding a few more scents to it, because there are some customers, especially kind of theatres or live concerts and that kind of thing, they like to be able to use loads of scents at the same time.
I once visited a church in Amsterdam where the one of the awards, it was the Olfactory Awards ceremony, and they also wanted to let people smell one of the winners of the awards, and they indeed used a ventilator. I'm sorry that I'm saying it again, because I suppose it's not very easy to use any other solutions. However, they had a scent in a very specific medium, I would say. So I don't know exactly what was that. It wasn't, of course, an alcohol perfume. It was something similar to a gas. However, yeah, it looked epic. But I think that this is probably not the solution people want. It's like you have to have first this gas prepared, and then you have to turn on ventilator. You probably know what I'm talking about. But
I think sometimes, particularly when there's an audience involved, it kind of harks back to the classic case of smell-o-vision in cinemas, where they wanted to scent them, and then all the smells ended up getting mixed in the air. And I think even today we get cinemas and theatres who want to use lots of different smells, and they're kind of they're very enthusiastic, but they're not so aware of some of the limitations and the risks of inserting lots of different smells in at the same time. So I try to advise customers and ask a lot about their projects and what might suit the situation the best, and the timings as well. Like if they have a theatre show on, even if they want to use maybe 10 different smells, I'll try to push them towards 3 so that they don't overwhelm people.
Yeah, I understand totally. It's not a model show when you have to show 50, 60, 100 models in different outfits. yeah, smells a little bit different to that. Many people will be saturated, and there are also a lot of other limitations. However, I wanted to ask maybe what are the most common limitations you encounter usually?
I think, fortunately, the technology allows us to do a lot. Sometimes it can just be a case of budget, I suppose. A lot of the time we will have people that want to spread smells outside, but they'll only have the budget for a little diffuser that you would use on your desk. And I have to explain, no, you need this big scent machine, I'm afraid. But it varies because, you'll have museums who have funding, or they might be a big theme park, or it might be a smaller company that doesn't have a big budget, but it might turn out that actually they don't need all the big equipment. And actually, like I was saying earlier, sometimes it can just be a little object that they need. So, yeah, there are so many different factors involved in all the different projects that people pull me up about that it's hard to pinpoint any specific
Yes.
limitations that recur.
This seems like every situation is basically unique.
Yeah.
Starting from the size to the actual use, like some people will need a smell for, I don't know, like for 10 hours a day or for 8 hours a day. And in some situations, it's just 10 minutes when you need it, or maybe even less.
Yeah, definitely. And then I always ask how big the room is that they want to scent in, or if it's for atmosphere, or if they want people interacting with it, or what the audience is like, because maybe it's not an audience that's expecting kind of fun smells and who might be shocked by rotting flesh, even though that might be the most appropriate smell for the theme.
I love your video on YouTube when you are talking about rotten flesh.
People find it amusing. It's a fun thing about smells. It's kind of culturally a bit silly.
Well, yet I would like to add that.
Yes.
But you do a lot of, probably you and your colleagues, you do a lot of work to make it look less silly.
Yeah. I suppose we can kind of twist it either way to our advantage. So you can talk about all the kind of effective tricks and psychological tricks and all the benefits to it. But then if we're trying to promote something or get into newspapers, then we'll veer more towards the silly side and talk about poo a lot and the things that people like to read about.
Yeah, just today I was watching in my friend's Telegram channel. He's a perfumer, and he really wanted to buy the poo smell-like spray to test it. However, he was disappointed because he said, well, he wrote that it was only 3 out of 10 on a degree of disgustingness. I just invented this word. However, it wasn't that disgusting as he wanted it to be.
Aha. Was that AromaPrime's poo?
No, it's just some unknown brand. But is your poo, your company's poo, more disgusting?
To say, I would say yes, generally, but I'm so used to all our smells that they're just kind of, I can tolerate all of them I find some of them quite pleasant, even if they're supposed to be bad. But I find compared to maybe those that might be made by perfumers who are used to making nicer smells and might struggle to make malodors, sometimes ours can be a bit more effective. We have lots of kind of acidic ones that almost, it feels like they're getting right into you and causing a physical reaction. So yeah, we do have quite a few repulsive ones, and I think poo is on the list.
You know what you've said? I really liked it because you said that you don't think about smells in the beginning you said something like you don't think about them as disgusting or not disgusting. And I think it really demonstrates how open your mind is, because that's exactly what children experience, and people, if they continue being, it's a Swedish word which comes to me about being curious. So
Yeah, I think it's a good approach to have if you, I suppose, I would say if you're working with attractions, but I suppose not many people do make smells for attractions. But in my case anyway, it's handy to not rule out any smells because sometimes what works in one context might not work so well in another, and what doesn't work in one will work good in another. Particularly in terms of history, because we kind of, when we think of historical smells, we think of like sewage on the streets and that kind of thing. Um, and sometimes there are smells that modern audiences might not like, but people in the past were kind of used to lots of the smells that we wouldn't like. So it's good to kind of be flexible in what you think is appropriate or not.
yeah, and what you've said, it is just basically my next question. Does it happen sometimes that you have to make a really long historical research before offering something to a client?
Normally, we're quite fortunate in that the say it's museums museums would normally ask for the historical smells, and they have their kind of well-read experts on the team, and they'll often have their own research that they've already done. So, like last year, we were making the smells of, I think it was maybe a 1950s salon, like a hair salon, and the museum had like a list of all the products that were used back then and what kind of elements those products had. So we had a lot to go on. And then also last year we made the smell of ether for the anesthesia museum, or I think I've got its name slightly wrong, but they had a doctor on their team who had used ether in his own practice, so he could sniff our samples that we sent based on their description, and he could check them to make sure they were correct.
I was about to make a joke that he was checking either he fell asleep or not. I mean, like,
Yeah.
felt conscious or not after smelling. Yeah, I see. But like, you've already mentioned one of the probably biggest limitations for for the client's perception about smells. Like they think that the only way to incorporate olfactory experiences into their collections, like, or either in the parks, is to have a very big machine producing smells, or like, yeah, in the wildest dreams they couldn't think that there are small solutions to a problem. However, what are probably some other misconceptions you have to deal with on a daily basis?
Sometimes customers will be kind of, I suppose, hesitant to ask about some smells. Like they'll say, "Oh, it will sound a bit silly, but we want some otter poo smell," for example.
Cool.
Even though that's our whole business. We're poo experts. Yeah, one, I suppose, misjudgment maybe is that there are smells that are too embarrassing to talk about, but we're happy to talk about all sorts of smells. And I suppose another one is cost, even though I did say that sometimes budget can be a limitation or it can't be. I think sometimes people expect smells or using smells to be really expensive, particularly because there are some companies that will kind of get you to subscribe to this really expensive program where they send you refills and things, and it's thousands of pounds. And people can be kind of surprised to find out that actually you can get a machine for about £100 and some oil that is maybe £100 or £200, but it will last you a whole year.
Yeah, yeah. I also, like, when I saw prices on your website, I thought like, wow, sadly I'm not in the UK to order something to try right away, but yeah, it seems very affordable.
Yeah, it varies. Again, it depends on what kind of attraction they're from and what their usual budgets are like, because sometimes people, on the whole, it's reasonable pricing compared to the some of our competitors, I suppose. But we also get some people that will look at it and say, "Oh, that's hundreds of pounds. That's far too expensive." But I think that's probably the case in all sorts of industries and products.
True, yeah. Have you ever encountered any concerns about safety of using, apart from the safety for the collection, for the mid-centuries works, but like for the people's health mostly?
Yeah, we'll always be preparing safety data sheets for customers who are kind of doing their risk assessments. Sometimes it's very rare really. I can only imagine or remember a couple of examples where a customer will say one of our customers or one of our visitors was concerned about this smell, or they were having asthmatic symptoms, but we can't necessarily pinpoint what was causing it. So we'll provide our safety data sheets just to kind of let them look at them and give them some peace of mind and kind of investigate it. But yeah, there's, I suppose because we provide those materials, there's never any issues really, which is a sort of a relief, because even though I know all our scents are safe, you're always, people's safety is kind of in your hands. So I'm very conscious of it, and trying to be as thorough as I can when I'm advising people.
I actually very like that you are one of the promoters of this idea that it's safe to have smells in your museum settings or in your themed park. And am I right that probably you participated in Odeuropa project somehow?
Yeah, I was very excited when I saw Odeuropa being launched, and I emailed them straight away, and then they kindly invited me to a couple of little discussions, and I had some online talks with them, and then I was kindly invited to talk about, I did a malodor presentation, so talking about using bad smells in museums, and I've been to some of their events. Oh, and I was fortunate to contribute to their olfactory storytelling toolkit and their encyclopedia of smell history as well. So yeah, even though I wasn't officially a member of Odeuropa, I felt part of the team. And I made friends with Sophia as well, who you've spoken to on your podcast.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I was very excited by all that they were doing, because it's such a niche area, historical smells, and it was brilliant to meet so many people that were either also working in historical smells or who were interested in it and discussing all their experiences.
But do you think that after this work, there would be probably a generation of perfumers who want to work specifically with this type of scents?
Hopefully. I wonder, I have been wondering actually, now that the project's over officially, I'm wondering how far their work will kind of be carried and who's going to be picking it up. So maybe you saw on LinkedIn, I've been recommending their Smell Explorer to some of our customers, like the Dungeons attractions, who I suppose some of our customers at AromaPrime, they're not all like historians, and some of them are like live theatre or theme parks, but they're still interested in historical accuracy. So I'm quite interested in introducing those kinds of customers to Odeuropa's work. So even though I suppose in my capacity I might not be creating new smell historians, I'll hopefully be introducing new approaches that Odeuropa's been working on to some of the more themed entertainment kinds of practitioners.
Well, I'm so sorry I haven't asked, but do you also work with the European clients, or you're mostly focused on the UK?
Yeah, we work all over the world. We're kind of limited in sending things to America, but other than that, it's all over the world.
Well, beautiful. Then if I now know who should I ask for something interesting if this opportunity arises. I also wanted to ask, like, do you happen to have any specific upcoming projects you want to talk about, maybe like in very broad sense, in your work?
I'm not sure. I suppose if I selfishly promote my novel again,
Please do.
I
Because I think
so
I need to order the previous one
well,
as well.
yeah. So the children's book I've written has been inspired a lot by AromaPrime, in that I've kind of got this understanding of how to describe smells, I suppose. And there's also a company in the book that is based on AromaPrime who makes smells for theme parks and museums. Although the company in the book is evil, which might be a spoiler. But on that topic, I'm working on the audiobook as well, so that people that don't quite have the time to be reading a book can listen to it instead.
And am I right that it's also scratch and sniff inside, or not?
There isn't scratch and sniff, but I did make some smells based on the story, and they're available as the little aroma cubes that I described. So they're on the AromaPrime website. You do have to buy them, so it depends on if you want to spend on some book-related smells. But
That sounds like a very cool project to me.
yeah, they're kind of for I had classes in mind if they're reading and they want to sniff along, or if there's anyone that just is particularly interested, they can sniff the aroma cubes as they reach certain parts of the story to immerse themselves in the story a bit deeper.
Well, that's beautiful because, it's probably, you definitely know it's one of the trends to make scented books for kids. And it was like a trend many years ago, but okay, like many, many years ago, I even saw on the internet one of the books about it. However, I haven't smelled it, but I'm happy it's back.
Well, I was talking to, maybe I'm pronouncing her name wrong, but Frauke Galia, who also works with scent. She's also been working on a book, and she was saying, I can't remember exactly what she said, but she wants to incorporate scent into it somehow. So yeah, it's kind of exciting to have a few smelly books.
Totally. Yeah.
Going on.
Yeah. It gives absolutely different feeling when you read it. Right, Liam. I'm out of questions apart for the Blitz questions, which I also have for you.
How exciting!
So I don't know how Blitz they are. It's always a specific. Sometimes they are even deeper than the ordinary questions. So I will start somehow. So the first one, the most crazy scent request you've ever received.
Well, actually, the one I have in mind wasn't asked of me, but my colleague was asked about it, and it was a little. I can't, for professional reasons, I can't really repeat what it was. It was rather inappropriate and disturbing.
Rather a true gentleman.
Yeah, you can use your imagination.
Well, yeah, I could at least imagine which part of the body was involved. Right, so then the second one, most popular scent among your clients.
Probably musty, which is very popular for just a general old house smell. So that's handy for historical venues, but also like escape rooms and haunted houses. And also, lots of our popular smells are the disgusting ones, such as rotting flesh and vomit and urine and poo. Because at Halloween we just sell so much of it, and it makes people scared, and people like it.
Yeah, so this is also something to consider. I mean, for those who think that this is something not common to us and we probably won't like it, well, it's the opposite.
Yes.
So, number 3, scent that surprises people the most, maybe. From those you've mentioned the most popular, but...
Yeah, I suppose there are two different avenues we could go down with this. So there are scents that people are surprised exist. Like dodo or penguin vomit in the AromaPrime collection. but then the scents that surprise people when they sniff them tend to be historical ones, I think. Either they'll sniff something and they'll be surprised that it's not as disgusting as they thought it would be, or they'll be surprised because it is really horrible and they'll recoil and try to retch and get it out of themselves.
Uh-huh. Did I hear correct that you said like penguin vomit?
Yeah, penguin vomit. We have, I think we have penguin poo as well, but the vomit tends to be more surprising.
Have you ever checked accuracy?
I haven't myself, but a lot of our animal poos have been based on real poos. Zoos are quite open to sending us poo. We've had jaguar urine and otter poo sent to us, and I'm pretty sure we've had some other poos. And I'm actually quite fascinated to smell animal poo when I can. I had the privilege of smelling some rhino poo maybe a year or two ago. And it's just really interesting to me because we sell these products, and to be able to smell the real thing is incredibly valuable, especially when it's not something that you get to sniff every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and rhino poo smells of grass, really, so it's not too complex.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I don't have any reason to try to do that. If you're saying it's a gross thing, but otherwise it's very intriguing.
Yeah. Penguin poo smells of fish, really.
Well, okay. Also, could imagine nothing to contradict.
And their vomit isn't too different.
Yeah, what you eat, literally.
Yes.
So, most challenging scent to recreate? What do you think?
Well, I've found with us turning 50 years old last year, I have found lots of old footage of our founder from the 70s. And back then he was saying how difficult it was to recreate the smells of bread and coffee, which is quite easy for us these days. I think some of the most difficult requests to deal with are when people have really personal memories of things. So they might say something like, I had this room in my old house and I want to recreate the smell of that, or I have this perfume that this person used to use, but I can't remember the name of it. And they just kind of...
Painful.
Yeah, they just describe it. And
I will start crying. No, don't do it ever to people.
If it's like an old room that they used to smell, they might say it was musty or damp or that kind of thing. And normally it's just too broad for us to work with, and we'll send as many samples as we can, and they'll say that they can't find a match. So that can be a bit of a challenge, but it doesn't happen a lot of the time because normally there's a very specific kind of a source that people are working to, or it's a very familiar smell. So that doesn't happen too often.
Gotcha, and I think this is one of the most challenging thing for anyone working with scents. Like, I remember the scent of someone, but I don't know the name.
Yeah, it can be. I think another thing, and something that I always want to encourage to customers, is that they get in touch with us as early as possible. Because sometimes we'll have people call us up and they want a very specific smell that we don't have in our collection, and we'll have to make special blends, but they want the smell in a couple of weeks' time, and it's just not too practical. And sometimes, like, even just relying on couriers, and that can be quite stressful for me, not having control of the time that it takes for something to get to someone, and things being stuck in customs. So it's always handy when people leave it at least a couple of months to get in touch with us, so we can have lots of time available.
Mm-hmm. Well, and my last question, is it possible to smell your collection somewhere, or maybe you will, like, at some point consider making your own museum of scents?
To answer the first stage of the question, we do send out samples if people are working on projects, so they can smell some of the smells that way. I also have a box in my house that's full of lots of different smells, and it's very tightly sealed, and when I open it, it's like the worst thing I've ever smelled. Even though I'm quite used to our smells, this one, with all of them combined, it's quite
It's
repulsive.
cacophony,
So,
totally.
yeah.
Even the most pleasant smells will not be as pleasant if they're mixed.
Yeah. So yeah, it's possible to smell our collection that way, but it wouldn't be very nice. And in terms of making like a smelly museum, I have been interested. I do a lot of research in the history of the uses of smells in theme parks and museums, particularly focusing on theme parks. And I have been interested in maybe one day presenting different smells that people have nostalgic connections to. Like at the Efteling theme park, for example, lots of people have very personal memories of those smells. And I would quite like to do a
it's the park in the Netherlands, because maybe our listeners don't know. Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, or like Disneyland has lots of people like the smell of the Pirates of the Caribbean water that's in the ride. And I would quite like to do an exhibition based on theme parks where people can smell different attractions that either they have nostalgic connections to, or just as a way of preserving the smells and kind of presenting them. That would be nice. But I'd need time and money for that.
Yeah, but this is a beautiful idea, and it's so good that you just mentioned it out loud, because maybe, and I really believe in it, maybe there will be other people interested in this cooperation. Because, like, right now, I noticed in the LinkedIn field that more and more museums are mentioning something scent related, and I believe the themed parks will be doing it as well. So in the years to come.
Yeah, hopefully. One of my kind of long-term book projects is a non-fiction book about how different attractions use smells, and there's lots of different case studies. And if I don't end up doing some kind of exhibition, then I'll end up releasing that book at least. Although it's kind of tricky because it talks about some competitors and it talks about some customers that maybe don't want me talking about certain things. So part of me is thinking maybe I'll publish it when I've retired as a kind of look back on everything.
I would be happy if you do it before you actually retire.
Yeah.
Because I would love to visit this exhibition, and I would love to visit the themed parks using your company's smells and also reading your books. So please don't postpone it that late.
Yes, I'll try not to.
Thank you. William, it was such a pleasure talking to you. I feel that you're so professional, and if anyone is interested in this type of experiences, I definitely feel that they have a right person, and I have the right person to talk to as well if somebody reaches my way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and it's been fun chatting. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to chat.
Thank you. And of course, all the links will be provided in the description box, and the links to your yet one book, but then to the second one we will update it definitely. Well, it was really super cool.
Thank you. That was fun.
Leo, you're so knowledgeable.